Africa is the future. The question is, what do you do about it?
You can see the tech and tech-enabled deals start to account for almost 80% of all the deals.
Tech is doing today is what GSM did.
We were looking for a platform that had a track record of creating talent. And so Don Jazzy, who was the CEO of MAVIN Records, he'd done it.
MAVIN would not be the success story today if we did not get patience and patient capital from Kupanda.
You cannot disrupt governance. Governance is a very important piece.
North American investors are accounting for about 33%. African investors are accounting for about 30%.
One of the secret recipe for Afrobeat is the good vibes.
Sometimes we'll found and build and scale companies that we believe can go from Africa to the world.
We're not pitching Africa as a destination for like aid or help. We're pitching Africa as a destination for opportunity.
It's your opportunity to not be restricted to one geography, one city.
Welcome in the Valley. I'm your host today and my name is Ibrahim Sanya. We have an amazing show today, but before that, a gentle reminder. Press that subscribe button, join the community of funders and founders, changing sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world. And never miss a thing. Enjoy the show.
So good morning, everyone. I hope you guys had beautiful breakfast, great coffee, because we have an exceptional panel here. What we want to deliver today was a great partnership of NASP and our friends is to allow you to get a sense of how fast things are moving and how fearsome things sound from far, but they're far from fearsome. I will have our panelists to introduce ourselves. I'll start with the right, with my Oga.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Abi Mustafa Madako. I'm the CEO of the African Private Capital Association, AVCA. AVCA is the industry body that promotes private capital going into Africa. We operate across 4 verticals. We track data and intelligence, so we provide you with the information around deal activity on the continent, looking across all asset classes. We do capacity building, we convene the industry, and then the final thing we do is advocacy. So we work with regulators, policymakers to essentially create an enabling environment for private capital on the continent to grow.
Thank you, Abi. Wale, over to you.
It's great to meet everybody here. My name is Wale Ayeni. I'm the managing partner of Helios Digital Ventures. It's a Series B mid-cap fund in Africa. We invest between $5 to $20 million in a Pan-African way. It's part of what Ibrahim was talking about, Helios. And Helios has been in Africa for about 20 years, manages about $4 billion in assets on the continent.
Thank you very much, Wale. Linda, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Oramasionwu-Leverette. I'm a founding partner at Kupanda Capital. And what we do at Kupanda Capital is we invest in, and sometimes we'll found and build and scale companies that we believe can go from Africa to the world. And we play an active role. We don't just do quarterly board meetings. We actually play an active operational and entrepreneurial role across our companies, and MAVIN Records is one of them.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Ogenejubo. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for MAVIN Records. Just really making sure we do what we said we do. In the creative industries, a lot of people have ideas, but being able to execute those ideas thoroughly is one of the things that I make sure we do our work. And as a platform, we just identify very young artists, put them through our academy, and then develop them for local and global consumption as well.
Thank you, Tega. So there is something quite interesting, which is the absurd adjacency between tech, sports, entertainment, music, and fashion. That obviously is visible clearly here in the West, but it's becoming even more so in our continent, and it's allowing capital to move elegantly from financial services to tech and to what we now denominate as creative industries. And the sound of the resonance is interesting because we believe in the organization I represent called Silverbacks that sits at that intersection, that this is a very unique time and place where the diaspora and the African residents have never had as much synchronization in terms of culture and brand identity. And I would argue that a movie that was created here called Black Panther has a lot to do in that synchronization. Because after that moment, whether it's the Afrobeat that our residents here have delivered to the world, or the Amapiano, or hip hop, or reggae, have played an essential role to get the melanin to collaborate. And we do believe that melanin collaboration is really where the secret sauce is. And we believe places and moments like today are unique opportunities to get the capital that resides here to have a glance into what's happening on the continent. With no further ado, I will have the one that doesn't want to be my boss tell you a bit more about what's happening on the ground.
Thanks, Ibrahim. So I just wanted to start by setting the context a little bit, just to give you a bit of an idea of the growth of technology investments on the continent over the past decade. So what we've seen in Africa, and permit me to say Africa, I know it's more nuanced with 54 countries, but just to give you a background, what we've seen on the continent is if we look back on a 10-year horizon, a real growth in tech investments, not just by VC investors, but interestingly, by PE investors as well, so technology and technology-enabled investments. So just to ground it in more data, in 2014, at the start of the eruption of VC on the continent, very few managers, very few early stage investments, very few tech investments at that point. And we saw, when we looked at all of the private capital investments in 2014, technology and technology-enabled deals accounted for just under 40% of all of the deals. Now, if we fast forward to 2022, 2023, the story paints a very different picture. So when we look at all the private capital deals in 2022, 2023, you can see the tech and tech-enabled deals start to account for almost 80% of all the deals. So what does that tell us? It shows the critical importance of technology and how it's disrupted a lot of sectors and disrupted investment activity on the continent. And it's important for us for this panel to start with technology, because that's the baseline and the foundation upon which all of these other creative economies are becoming more attractive. So that's where we are with tech and tech-enabled deals. If we take a closer look as to the sectors, so what we've seen with technology is its disruption of traditional sectors on the continent. So everyone that thinks of Africa, you think of fintech. Even for investors that are not familiar with Africa, you instantly think of fintech. So of course, traditional sectors like agriculture, healthcare, consumer discretionaries, we've started seeing technology playing a very active role in those sectors. We're seeing a lot of deals, unicorns. I won't say the dreaded word unicorn, but we have had quite a few unicorns on the continent, all deriving from fintech. So that's a very important role that tech has been playing. And then when we compare ourselves to other regions, so I will start by saying, early stage investing tech in Africa, it is a nascent industry. I mean, it's only been about 10 years plus, but when we compare ourselves, and I think the most, like-minded market is Latin America. When we compare ourselves to Latin America, what's happened in 2023 is the share of early stage investments in Africa has outpaced Latin America. So obviously, globally, we've seen the downturn in tech, we've seen the layoffs, we've seen a contraction of tech investments globally. But what's wonderful about Africa is it took almost a year for us to be hit by this funding winter that all the other geos had to suffer. So this contraction of deal activity as a result of hyperinflation, all other global macro, didn't quite hit the continent until the last quarter of that year, of last year, demonstrating the resilience of the African continent. And then further, we've now outpaced Latin America in terms of deal activity. So last year, for VC investments in Africa, we had about $4.5 billion, which might seem very small when you compare it to US VC investments, but please allow us, we're a nascent industry and we are growing. We will get there. But when we compare ourselves to Latin America, deal activity was $3 billion. So what's interesting in this tipping point is now seeing Africa start to, and no disrespect to anyone from Latin America here, but we're starting to see Africa outpace Latin America as of last year. So it'll be really interesting to see how we continue to fare versus other developing economies going forward. And I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much, boss. So I think that crucial point that Abby just made is important to capture because where we sit here in the US, the closest market is Latin America. And in the African continent, even the capital that's raised around technology, about 65% of the citizenship comes from the US. Previous year was actually higher. So America remains the largest investor in the tech industry on the African continent. In Latin America, you'd argue is the same. So it's showing you that for a region that is so close to the US, which is Latin America, we're able from Africa, where we're so far, to manage to raise the same or more money. So clearly there is something happening there that it's important for sophisticated investors to take note of. I'm gonna move now to Wale, who basically, from two perspectives, should be able to give us some great insight about what it means for tech and the role it plays for technology, because Wale, before joining Helios, was with the IFC and led fundamentally their technology investment strategy for a while. And what we believe is that whenever we chat is when you think about it is tech is really a new season or season 2 of what happened almost 15 years back when you had telecom changing the entire space. So GSM, what tech is doing today is what, if you've been following the African continent, GSM did about 15, 20 years back, because it's fundamentally an acceleration of all other sectors and basically contracts the maturity you need to wait for your capital gain or your exit to happen. So technology is having the same impact today, but I'm gonna let our dear guru in the sector give us more insight.
I like Ibrahim and his compliments. Let's see who's a guru here. But anyway, I think in venture capital, we have a tendency to make very bold statements, right? So I just want to leave you with 3 bold statements here. I think the first one I actually made it somewhere and people thought I was crazy. But the first one is Africa is the future. And when I say that, people are like, what do you mean? But you know, if you look at the stats, right, by 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African. Africa is going to contribute about 80% of the working age population to the globe. 1 in 3 youth is going to be African. It's a continent of 1.4 billion people with a median age of 19, right? So when we are looking at, you know, we invest in the future, and the future is a mega trend for us. And Africa fits right there. I was telling somebody in San Francisco, except you're going to follow Elon Musk to Mars, for the rest of us on Earth, Africa is the future. So the question is, what do you do about it? Because it could be a positive future, it could be a negative future, but the fact is that I don't think 1.4 billion people, average age of 19, is going to take the current place that the world has allocated to it. So there's a very important factor there. The second thing that is also very, very true, like, it's about the globe is actually a lot smaller. It's smaller today than it was 10 years ago, than it was 20 years ago. I was looking at stats the other day. When you look at bandwidth connectivity internationally, we used to measure it in 2010 in megabits per second. Today, we measure it in gigabits per second. Everybody's walking around with compute in their pockets. Everybody has access to information. So the world is actually quite smaller. And within that smaller world, there's going to be a lot more Africans, right? And for our thesis perspective, which actually fits to what this panel is about, it's really around culture, right? Is that, when you step back and think about what is culture, like, how do people define culture? It's how you eat, how you dress, what music you listen to. For the longest time, the culture of society has been quite centralized, where there have been a lot of filters to determine what you should wear, how you should eat, how you should speak. But we're living in a lot more decentralized world where there are all these platforms that allow culture to be discovered, talent to be discovered. And I do think that is a paradigm shift in what's going to happen in the future. So for our thesis and our fund is that, when you look at how market cap was built, it's like, I'm not, I'm old but not too old, so maybe my market cap started with oil and gas, went into telcos, now it's the FANGs. But the truth of the matter is that there's going to be value creation that is not going to look like in the next 50 years, that is not going to all come from Silicon Valley. We've already seen TikTok as a phenomenon, but our thesis is that we can build very large-scale digital Pan-African platforms that will not only help with the discovery, but also capture the value. So one of the things we're really, really bullish around is that we're not pitching Africa as a destination for like aid or help. We're pitching Africa as a destination for opportunity and future, and creating businesses that can capture that value and capture that wealth, not just be on the receiving end. But those three things, I think it's kind of the thesis of the fund, and it rides through most of what we're seeing on the continent from an opportunity perspective.
Thank you very much, Wale. And the interesting part is what he says about tech is really whether you're in Latin America, Asia, or Africa, is the reality is that tech has become a barrier killer, a frontier destroyer, and the world is becoming smaller. And that's why I think it is apt to hear from Linda, because I think from Washington, D.C., to basically go and foresee the coming of calm down and sitting at that intersection before the foreigner arrival at immigration. What triggers the foresight?
Thank you, Reem. Now, for us, fundamentally, we started looking at music on the continent in 2016. So the interesting thing for us was that already you could see that culture was exportable. And beyond that, the barriers that, took fashion or textiles to come into the US, they weren't there with a digital asset like music. So that really caught our attention. Furthermore, in terms of what the old music industry used to be like in this country, you'd have to go to radio, physical distribution. These were real barriers to entry. But those were falling with Spotify and digitized content. So for us, we really thought that there was an opportunity for Afrobeats to come to the world, not just as world music and as exotic, but as actual pop music. We were seeing it via TikTok, you were seeing it on Facebook. I mean, kids were dancing all over the world to the same music. And that presented an opportunity for disruption for us. So, as I stated before, Kupanda's thesis is bringing Africa to the world. And, for us, ultimately, music is a digital asset. We looked way before COVID, timing was perfect, right? You saw what was happening globally in the music rights industry, forget Africa, but globally, it went bananas because music is something you listen to while you sleep. So revenues can flow in that way as well. So we like that. So ultimately for us, we were looking for a platform that had a track record of creating talent. It done it multiple times. It wasn't just one shooting star. And so for us, Don Jazzy, who was the CEO of MAVIN Records, he'd done it. He'd done it under his previous label, Mo Hits, and he started MAVIN in 2012 and already had a 4 or 5 year track record of creating talent. Initially at that time, you saw on the continent more cottage industries of labels. So you'd have a guy who'd find talent and, take that talent to the world. But we were looking for what could be an institutional investment. So ultimately, somebody who'd done it before and we could really scale with. And MAVIN was that. Beyond that, at the time we invested, Teg, I think about maybe 10% of your revenue was international. Today, it's about 95%, hard currency international. And that took the vision of having a founding team that saw what they were doing and they knew it could go to the world. And were willing to take on, a partnership where, we did things differently, but we were able to take a company that had, I think, all the raw material for success and take it to the world, make it more institutional. And technology was critical in that. Our thesis, to be clear, our base case did not include Spotify coming to Africa. It was really looking at, hopefully our route was maybe we'd get to London, and from London, in the diaspora in London, we might maybe get a small chance in the US. That's how we looked at it. But I think we underestimated the connectivity of the global youth, because we got to London, but through the US and sometimes through Netherlands, it would be viral, right? And technology played a huge, huge role in that. And the role of Spotify coming to Africa and Nigeria in particular, we always talk about it, how it corrupted the algorithm. While the revenues present on the continent are lower, you still have ears and eyeballs that actually create virality. So those are some of the things that we found to be super, compelling about this investment.
And Linda, I think it would be apt to point out that in your portfolio, you have other companies that are very data capture driven, and how that knowledge and effort around data tracking came to contribution in this investment.
Yes, and that was one of the ways. To be clear, we were ahead of the game, but honestly, some of the global players were already visiting these guys. And it was the data that really helped really bring them to, I think Wale spoke about it very well. There's a bulge, right? You see that there is this really large and fertile, consuming population, right? So that was one of the things that really brought us specifically to Lagos, it's kind of the Hollywood. For all of those it's the Hollywood of Africa and to the world, right? So it brought us there and brought us to MAVIN in particular. Frame, one of our companies that does data, made that just apparent to see.
Excellent. Now, Tega, you're the man of the hour. She's given the preface of the love story. So how did it really happen?
As Linda said, the data and technology sort of gave them where to look, with regards to, there's a record company in Africa called MAVIN, but with regards to building what to look, so there's where to look, but if you look, what do you find? I would say my role in that instance was you had a creative marvel in Don Jazzy, super risk taker. He just strictly believes it. He doesn't buy anything off the shelf. He doesn't sign any artists from being viral. He just believes his ear can hear your talent and he can develop you as a producer. You have a potential. And, we were investing serious monies in this artist. The business model was not really where you would want it to be. And when I came in, I'm like, okay, interestingly, we're cousins. I'm like, Jazzy, let me do this for you. Let me focus on the structure of the kind of business we want to build while you focus on just the creative aspect of, working and developing this artist. And I came in, set up some things like marketing. But some people in my industry would say my golden age era was really our partnerships, because we didn't really have money, but we had marketing ideas. So we had to go to big corporations like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and the telcos and say, hey, look at the amount of cultural equity we've built just within Nigeria, but also international as well. We would need you to pay some money for our music video. They'll be like, oh, Tega, why not? That's what we should do. We'll put some money there. We need you to sponsor our end of year concert. So that's why Linda said, when they came, we had a huge business. Our home, we sort of trickling revenues from the rest of the world. But we were so comfortable that we had a business in Nigeria, and the corporate brands in the country built an amazing B2B relationship with us that we sustained over the year with regards to brand partnership and corporate sponsorship. And something I was super critical about was sort of sadly the lopsided nature in which there was so much creative talent and not a lot of executive talent. I was like, oh my God, we can't build a true sustainable business if we just have literally maybe one employee to 12 artists. I'm like, this is not possible. So I started studying org charts, organograms, announcements of hirings in international companies that were playing in the entertainment, media, music, and sports space. And I said, okay, Jazzy, this is what we're going to do. Just what you've done with taking the young talent through the academy, I'm going to bring in young people that I think have the passion, the grit to want to really work in the media and entertainment industry, and launch a program called MAVIN Future 5. And that program was to spend 2 hours every Wednesday with just young people that are super inspired to be part of the music business, just expose them to the rigor and the day-to-day work that we do. But something I want to touch on, because again, we're talking about technology and the diaspora audience. I would say the first thing the diaspora audience did for us was some sort of cultural ambassador. So I had friends that went to uni with me, people that we grew up with, that immigrated to different aspects of the world. And I'll just go on their Facebook and they're some sort of office DJ. So it's maybe they just closed the deal or somebody's birthday party at work, and they'll just trust the Nigerian there to sort out music. And I'll just hear Davido, Whiskey, Bonobo, Tiwa. I'm like, oh, wow, good job. I'll just comment, like, well done. And then that started going down. They start having kids. They're in uni. And then those kids in uni sort of picked up the content creator tag. So they're influencers. And next thing, they're creating dance moves on TikTok. Like Linda said, there's no border, right? It's technology. So they're using this social media platform to aggressively create content, identify with our culture. And I was interviewing, interesting, this was in Paris. I was interviewing 2 of the attendees at the Rema concert. One was Moroccan, and the other one was from Tunisia. And she said, they usually take me to French concerts. So when Rema was coming to town, I bought tickets for all my co-workers to come and see Rema. I was like, oh wow, this is so empowering. So beyond them just being cultural ambassador, they are also consumers that put their heart in. $40, $20 ticket behind some of the shows that were setting up in this international markets. And just something that I feel it's important is, like Linda said, we didn't plan on Spotify. We didn't think they would ever remember us, but me and her, we traveled a lot, spent days in US, London, trying to get distribution deals, because we thought this was very critical for the investment we just raised from Kupanda Capital to be able to distribute the music that wasn't CDs or vinyls or cassettes, those classic music materials. So being able to close down distribution deals were critical, and then being able to also have some sort of a marketing arrangement whereby your distributor is able to participate in the revenue and profit that they generate for you as a business. So doing this in the winter, it was 2018 for when.
And they were not kind to us.
They were not kind.
So for all the, early on, Pega's being very generous. We traveled to London and people like, Afrobeats. You know what you guys need to do? You need to sound more like, and I remember sitting and thinking, I'm going to write your name. No, I'm just joking. No, in all seriousness, there was a lot of critique. Mm-hmm. They were telling us how the genres contracts needed to change, how things needed to look different. But
True. No, and that was a good chip on our shoulder, to be honest. I went back to Nigeria saying, oh my God, Jazzy, they don't believe in us. This is crazy. We need to work 3 times the work that is required. And the pandemic just really showed that early investment we made in travel, reaching out to these people, taking everything that came with signing these deals was worthwhile, because when everybody was home, and I made a bet to them for them. We don't talk about it much, but I told them touring would be the big business. I'm like, Linda, Bobby, Kupanda, don't worry. Touring is going to save us. Can't wait to travel the world and do shows.
2020.
And then the pandemic hits, and we're all at home on Zoom calls. I'm like, wow, I never thought a day would come we will not be performing to people. This is crazy.
But they shored up, right? We talked about digital assets and really the IP. So this is where this partnership and the trust really mattered. We decided that we were going to invest behind touring, but fundamentally that we really wanted IP and also just, build up recording rights. So 2020 came, and actually that's when this company actually started to really, the growth was exponential. It was as people sat and listened to the music and made dances at home, that this music really went over the ocean. And there was actually some important learning for all of us. It was that most record companies are made off of the rights. They're made off of the IP, the music, the streaming. And we saw that and we learned quickly and built, doubled down and built around that.
Yeah, and I think Linda just touched on trust. This was something that was hard. You can imagine you have a producer-led founder business, and it's about vibration, creativity, and these people come in and say, we're investors. It's like, okay, why do I believe you can truly invest in my business and create value with me? And I think people don't talk about the patience that Kupanda Capital had with us. We had no clue. We didn't prepare any situation, any corporate governance waiting for investment. We were just building a just creative business, and they truly believed and spent the time with us. And we did think that almost close to 18 months of just following up with us, meeting us everywhere, we thought, okay, we trust these people now. We think we share the same values. We think we share the same vision for the business, and being able to take in that patient capital really helped us scale.
No, Linda and Tega, seriously, this is wonderful and warms, I mean, at least from a personal standpoint, I think for many of us here that went to school here 30 years back, you know, I'm from Senegal and we were French colonized. So we used to hear all those American songs, which are in English. And if you heard me singing Roses Are Red or some of those songs, we were convinced as Senegalese, we would say gibberish, but the gibberish was the right lyrics. So I would be in the US, argue with an American who's telling me the lyrics are A, and I'm like, no, it's not the lyrics. And today what you observe is our kids, is you run into an American who's singing Calm Down or Yoruba song with completely wrong lyrics, but he's fully comfortable.
Fully comfortable.
Fully comfortable with the
like
gibberish.
it like that.
So it just shows you how we are all similar and try to create these differences. And at this stage in our history, it's great to see how the IP is getting managed by our own. So I think it's a good segue to now hear the courtship, how it went with Universal, because I know that it was not the only gentleman knocking on the door.
I'll allow Linda to talk on this. But like I said, we also actually even didn't build and say, oh, maybe Universal will come on it. That was not also something that we did. And I was just saying with Abby when I met her briefly this morning that a lot of us sending me congratulations notes, and I don't know what we might have done because maybe some people in the office I'm not good at celebrating, but we were really just buried in work. The honest truth was we had multiple chips on our shoulder, but one of the biggest was, in Africa, you raise a lot of money from friends and family. That's the truth. Most of your early investment in your business come from friends and family or people that really believe in what you're doing. So to have Kupanda go through the Atlantic Ocean, though they have diaspora ties with what we're doing, and go the time, the patience. Even two of our biggest artists didn't renew with us during the due diligence process. And I'm like, Linda, I think maybe there's a reason why we're not supposed to do this deal. Two of my biggest artists are no longer renewing with us. They're like, don't worry, let's continue, let's close, let's go and build this business. So closing was like, Jazzy and I said, look, we have to prove to people that these guys didn't make a mistake, that we're the right guys to back at the race, and we need to focus on the race. So just burying our head in so much work. Like I said, we closed these distribution deals, we put all this infrastructure in place, corporate governance was there. Structurally, we were very sound. And having almost maybe actively 6 to 7 people look into our books during the course of the due diligence process just gave me so much confidence, because you will have the CEO of the company shoot me a text, hey, Tiger, my finance people are comfortable with this deal. I think we have something here. Wow, I'm impressed. I'm like, oh, really? I even thought we were a work in progress, but a lot of people truly felt that we've built something that was structurally sound and was worthy of their huge investments, either in time or finances, for due diligence, to have us come to a point where we felt UMG, of course, won the round.
Linda, from your standpoint, because I know that it's important to highlight that even before bringing Universal, you guys had both TPG.
Yeah, so Kupanda Capital has, it has a joint venture via a vehicle called Kupanda Holdings with TPG Growth. And so they backed us for this investment with MAVIN while we did the operational work. Now, with regard to Universal, I think Tega noted it very well. We were just trying to build an excellent asset. So they had the raw material there, what I call the factory. They really knew how to train and market artists. So fundamentally, our job as Kupanda Capital was to make sure that we could support them and build a company that could withstand institutional rigor. UMG's due diligence, they're a publicly traded company. So it wasn't, there were no pats on the back, good for you, Africa. It was, the QV, it was all the things you'd expect from a publicly traded company doing due diligence. And I'm proud to say that the company really, to Tega's point, was institutional ready. The governance was there. The accounting and finance was there. It was a UK company with UK contracts. There were things that we did to prepare this company it was unique, right? Our contracts had some things that were unique in them, but you had to make some things somewhat recognizable for institutional investors. So we knew that we would have UK law governed contracts, but we'd have a lot of value creation in Nigeria. We knew that there would have to be, IFRS audited statements. So those weren't the things to get cute and fancy about. They had to look standard, right? Corporate governance had to be standard, because we knew it was an unfamiliar jurisdiction. And I think music globally can be a little bit more, people think of it, look, I think diligencing some US music assets is there's a lot of fun there too. So add music plus Africa, we had to make sure that it was above board and institutional grade.
No, that's phenomenal. And obviously what I think is important for the audience to note is this is one prevailing story at the top of the mountain, but there is many others that are occurring that do not necessarily get as much press. And obviously this was a publicly listed company coming to buy a leader in a sexy industry. And it was very unexpected for many. But there's a lot of entrepreneurs grinding on the continent, and that's really the message I think is important to highlight. We also, this year, were lucky to back an entrepreneur with similar feature, just like Don Jazzy, who was a serial entrepreneur. She was of Indian descent, third generation in Nigeria. They had a prevailing, successful business across Nigeria in different parts of the country. She decided to, after studying the UK and the US, to go and set up a restaurant. Her parents were having headaches at the idea that she was not going to come and run the family business. And the restaurant became Bistro 7. It was the best breakfast place in Lagos. And the buyer of her business, she got her exit from MI. So again, music showing up 4 years back to provide the exit. When she got her money, the parents were like, you've proved your point now, come back to the family business.
So,
Nope. Stubborn like an entrepreneur, she's like, I'm gonna do a movie now. And then she comes up with a movie that many of you may know called Namaste Wahala, which is a love story between an Indian and a Nigerian. But when you think about it, at the basic total addressable market, that was a no-brainer. 1.4 billion Indians, 300 Nigerian, 1.7 billion people in country. If you take the diaspora, probably 1.9. And solid disposable income at the diaspora level. Like, we tend to look at Africa at the 1.4, but there's actually, outside of Africa, a population that provides $100 billion a year of remittances. What's the definition of remittances? Is the money you can spare. So that talks to you about the power that the diaspora has still not put to work. So imagine the numbers from the Indian part. So obviously, just like them, at the cusp of COVID, she was trying, her exit was to sell it in movies, theaters. COVID came. Netflix was like, I'm buying your movie. Forget the movie theater. It became top 10 in 10 markets, including the US, the UK, UAE, South Africa, and obviously Nigeria. So she did the second movie, and just like you guys were like, serial founder, they've proven their case. Let's do it. She took the same idea, brown people falling in love with black people, and did a series. Not very creative, but enough to get Netflix to come back and allow us to, again, double and triple our money. But there's so many gems like that that are out there on the continent, and they follow your basic thesis of something rare, unique, investable, and that you can provide, like Linda was saying, all the features of institutionalizing the entrepreneur and make them serial. So now, obviously, that entrepreneur like them, we're following them, whatever they do, blindly. Because obviously they proved the case, they learned this lesson, but I think the key point is just like, Tega, the entrepreneur needs to be willing to get to that destination. They cannot just, they need to be willing to learn these processes, to get the governance. And that's a key feature that really makes the change between those that make it and those that don't.
This episode is powered by Africa Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, also known as AFCA. AFCA is the leading Pan-African industry body championing and enabling private investment in Africa. They provide independent, thoughtful, and crucial research to the African private equity and venture capital industry. They also organize networking platforms for their members throughout the year across Africa and around the globe. We are a big fan.
And obviously, I will turn to my boss to tell us what she thinks from what has happened, transpired the last decade, the last 5 years, the last 20 years, what has gone right, but also what could we improve upon.
Firstly, I just want to say that's an excellent, very inspiring story. I was saying to Tega, you should put your head up and enjoy the congratulations a little bit. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So I
Round
think,
of applause for...
so in terms of what has gone right, obviously everything. No, I think that there are a few things that we've seen that I think have been impressive and demonstrated an industry that is on the cusp of, no, that is growing, but is on the cusp of something truly great. I'll reference what you said, Wale, earlier about Africa as the future. It really is. And these are a few nodes that are really showing us how much of a future it is. So I'll start by talking about the type of investors that have been investing on the continent and how that has changed, which is, again, a demonstration of how, I guess, robust the industry is now. So like I said earlier, when VC started, and Linda referenced 2016 and 2014, this whole concept of taking a risk, early stage investments, it just wasn't there. A few guys were doing it. We all thought they were a bit nuts, and we thought this is just not going to happen. I don't understand how you can take a chance on an idea or on a business that isn't generating profit or isn't even revenue positive at that point. But along the times, we've started seeing more investors coming in. What's interesting is if we look back about 4 years, North American investors really dominated the investor types that were investing in early stage investments. So at the time, if we look back 4 years ago, North American investors accounted for over 40%, while African investors, interestingly, accounted for about 15%. But in terms of what's the evolution, what I'm really proud of is that now also we have the likes of Wale's fund, Helios. We have a lot of African fund managers that are also committing capital, and of course Kupanda, that are committing capital to these businesses. So the pendulum has shifted a little bit. Now what we're seeing is North American investors are accounting for about 33% of early stage deals, and African investors are accounting for about 30%. So the interesting shift is we've started backing our own, and we've started raising enough capital to back our own. And this is where institutional capital becomes important, US institutional capital and also local institutional capital, to back fund managers to be able to back these success stories. The second thing I'll mention is a new crop of investors that have started backing tech investments, corporate ventures. So if we look back to 2014, the notion just didn't exist. There were just a few of them. Now corporate ventures are the third most prominent investor types that are backing tech investments. What I would like to see, and I was chatting to Wale about it earlier, is more African corporate ventures. So when we look at the corporate venture dynamic, about 90% of them are international. I think there's massive scope in the future for us to galvanize some of our big corporates on the continent to set up corporate venture arms. The next evolution we've seen is founders backing founders. So I think the true sign, and I'll reference your story about MI buying Bistro 7, the true sign of a sustainable industry is when you can pave the way forward. And that's becoming increasingly more important. We've seen founders that have been able to raise capital, exit businesses, start backing new founders, start mentoring new founders, start raising funds, vehicles to support other founders. So that's really important, and we hope to see more of this in the future. And then the last thing I'll say is more centered around what I would like to see and what we think is needed in the industry is more the diversification of institutional capital. So when we look at the finance continuum, for more businesses like MAVIN Records to be backed, for us to have more exits, because with tech investments, we're seeing exits like they're mostly M&A. We're not seeing IPOs like we're seeing here. I mean, we're seeing a few, but they're more, not really that many for tech investments. So we're relying more on strategics, on M&A. So for us to be able to managers to be able to back more businesses and have more exits, the the capital allocation mix is very important. So this is where we need more commercial capital, not just international commercial capital, but also local commercial capital as well. Our pension funds on the continent, our HNIs, all must be galvanized towards backing vehicles that can support some of these businesses. So that's what I would like to see a little bit more in the future, more diversity in the capital allocation mix, more support from the diaspora, whether through angel investments or whether through building strategic partnerships for businesses on the continent to be able to make partnerships or knowledge share with those in the diaspora.
Wow. Wale, what do you have to compliment to our boss?
It's definitely hard to follow a boss, right? So, but I think that the two things I would say I actually talk about more about the Black diaspora to what you were talking about, Tega, about like being purveyors of culture outside. Anecdotally, I was in Colombia on vacation, this was a few years ago, got into a taxi, and not because I'm Nigerian, because it was on radio, that we were bopping to Afrobeats. You know, like, I was like, what is going on? Like, these guys don't understand English. Like, so, and Afrobeats is broken English. So it's harder to understand. But I say that for saying that I think we sometimes overlook the power of the Black diaspora. And that's a very strong, and it's global in a sense. And it's transforming not that Black diaspora to not just purveyors of culture, but also finding way from capital allocators to capture some of that value, which is quite important. And we're seeing it a lot more every day in Africa. You mentioned that your thesis didn't include Spotify coming in. In the last 12 months, yeah, we had PayPal co-invest with us in Egypt. We had Shopify co-invest with us in Nigeria. So, and for both of those companies, those their first two tickets into Africa. So you can see that the global tech corporates that they see from an African perspective that there's a lot of, maybe there's no ARPU in Africa, but there's a lot of MAUs, and MAUs are quite valuable globally. So that's one thing I would say is that it's that the opportunity is not, in my view, obviously I'm biased, right? It's not like, when I say Africa is the future, I'm thinking the opportunity we see is today, right? It's not like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, whatever. I think people that have capital coming in today, it's a great way, or it's a great time to come in. The one thing I think that we are doing better of, and I think Linda mentioned it as well, there's some things that you can disrupt. There are other things that you cannot disrupt. You cannot disrupt governance, right? So, like, I mean, it's for that opportunity to crystallize. Governance is a very important piece. It's a value creation thing, and I do think that governance piece in Africa is becoming stronger and stronger. And that's why you've seen a lot of more, like, global companies getting comfort that they can work with African investors to invest in African founders and African plays. But I do think just laser focused on the governance piece, it's kind of one thing that the ecosystem, we're actually gathering people to not overlook that, because that's sometimes a deal breaker.
Thank you, Wale. Now I'm gonna give a chance to Tega to tell us that now that he brought home with Linda's assistant, the big dog, what is he working on next? Because obviously that's a milestone. But I'd like to welcome your insight into what is the most exciting thing you're working on at this moment.
Sure. So I think historically I've always felt it's a two-pronged growth approach. That's what I've always felt. But I think with the UMG deal, it just reinforces what I've always known, that we have two fronts to grow. One is globally and one is on the continent. And I always just say this everywhere I go, that I have a chance on the microphone, because most times you can tweet, but you might not be tweeting to the right people. But if you speak in forums like this, you may be speaking to the right people, which I believe I am. The continent has, while I've echoed and Abby as well, have so much potentials. MAVIN would not be the success story today if we did not get patience and patient capital from Kupanda. So knowing that I'm building a business in somewhat of a one of 11 pillar value chain type of industry, I'm really looking forward to more MAVINs and more Kupanda stories from the continent. And I'm charging people to be patient with the founders that they find, and just really understand why they're doing what they're doing in such a sort of growing ecosystem. And also with the founding team to understand, like Wale said, you can't disrupt everything. Things like corporate governance is critical. Audits, all of these things are critical to make sense of your business, to people that don't know you, up to your parents or your mother's house. So really having patient capital that is truly patient, and the patience to deploy it with the founders, is something that I'm putting out there. But for us, we're going down to double down on MAVIN at 15, which is 2027, to truly build more international artists, but most especially drive and advocate for a lot of market development on the continent.
Amen to that. Linda.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to just echo Tega's message, because to be fair, I just want everyone to know that you're going to look for the fundamentals, a solid partner who can, that withstands diligence and rigor, but not everything's always going to look the same. So with MAVIN, for example, we had to help them build their financials in a way that, our partners would fully understand. And to be fair, it was well worth it. I mean, we invested in the end of 2018 and returned more than 10 times capital. I mean, it was impressive, but it was also because it took a lot of work. So it was one of those things that I just want to make sure that patience is, and understanding that if you find the right partner, it's not, our contractual structure, for example, our advisors from the UK and the US, who had done music for over 30 years, they were saying, this doesn't work, change it. There were pieces we could take, but our partner, told us this is not going to work in our context. And we worked with their advice. And to be honest, when we sold when we went to sell the asset, they looked at these agreements and were like, these capture value in a way that we've never done it. So there's something to be said for, finding the right partner and trusting them.
Amazing. Abby, what's keeping you excited these days, project-wise?
I think what's keeping us excited, our main focus is around building the sustainability of the private capital industry. So we're working a lot to support first-time managers to adequately fundraise, to think about deal sourcing and to deploy capital. And we're doing that two-pronged approach with theoretical capacity building and also focusing a lot on peer-to-peer knowledge. So we really believe in getting the advice from those that have walked the path. So we are linking first generation managers with second, third generation, and also with their counterparts in other emerging markets so that they can learn from experiences of others that have come before them and hopefully equip them with the soundness of theoretical and practical knowledge to be successful.
Oh, that's why we love having her as a boss. Wale?
I think what's keeping us excited is, we can't talk too long about it, is really around currencies. Like the short and long of it is there's trillions of flows that goes through Africa, actually outside Africa, but most times it's settled outside of Africa. And when you're in Africa, you see there's a lot of mobile money in country, there's a lot of real-time payments. But when you do cross-border, it becomes harder to do. So basically, there's trillions of flows that we think is ripe for disruption, because as you've seen this, Spotify is in Africa trying to find a way to get paid, and it becomes quite hard. So finding a platform where you can actually enable a lot of frontier market players, like the Colombian taxi driver, should be able to settle the Nigerian artist real time very quickly. So there are platforms that we think would be quite disruptive to really start capturing value in kind of the not just the content, but the money movement flows around kind of Black diaspora. So.
Amazing. I think to be fair, I should open the floor for question. We have spoken a lot. I don't know how we're doing with time. Well, I think he's saying the time is up, but maybe I'm going to cheat and ask one or two questions. Okay, I think one question in the back. I'm getting a menacing look from the back.
Real quick, thank you for your remarks today. It's been very insightful. As someone who's been raised on the hip hop culture here and seeing the impact domestically and abroad, I'm curious about the messages and the content that artists are performing on the continent. Obviously, 54 different countries, a lot of different kind of issues. But what is the focus on delivering messages that are going to uplift people more so than just be entertaining? Are there artists talking about promoting wealth accumulation? Are we politically? How would you describe the general sentiment about what's being promoted to the public? Because hip hop, while I enjoy it, there are avenues that are uplifting and avenues that are destructive. I'm wondering what your perspective is.
Sure, no, that's a very good question. One of the secret recipe for Afrobeat is the good vibes. That's one of the secret recipe. The barbecue, the family function, the auntie's birthday, even if you paid us, we don't know how to make violent music. Yeah. Well, we have harsh realities, but what's the fella song? Suffering and smiling. Yeah, so we have harsh realities and things, political things that we don't like, but mostly with these artists that are younger, these Gen Z guys that are leading the music charge today, they don't want to talk about those things. They want to be more aspirational, more positive, and largely a ton of love songs. Yeah, that's what you find.
And since the menacing look is looking more menacing, I will aim to comply. But I will invite all of you. This panel is going to be recorded in a podcast we own and manage called In the Valley. So if you go on Google, type Silverbacks, which is the name of our company, and add Valley, you'll get it. We have about 2 million views over the last year. You have a lot of business leaders from the venture capital space, sports, people from NFL, NBA, and you can learn a lot more about what's happening in the continent. But be informed, but don't miss out. FOMO is a very terrible place. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, if you like today's story, press like, leave a comment, subscribe, come back for more stories from founders and funders changing the face of sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world. We look forward to seeing you again soon.